Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Roundup episode. So, Stadia 2020, are you hyped? Probably not, but Google sure do seem to have some big claims about what they're planning to pull off, and yes, it involves a sharp turn towards Epic. Past that, Ubisoft have underwent a pretty major restructuring in light of customers finding their games to, well, you know, kind of all feel the same. Past that, ROCKSTAR are apparently being put under quite a bit of pressure, and Sony's potential controller plan could indicate a new-ish strategy for the next gen from them. So, with that, be sure to like, sub, ring that bell, and let's get going. Google Stadia. Yeah, do you remember that? The maligned streaming platform this week has released a new blog entry that details what actually lies in store for Stadia in 2020, and given how much coverage we've given Stadia, it's important to talk about. Now, it actually starts by looking at the highlights of 2019, which, I mean, it's not much there. Their only real highlight is Google's acquisition of Typhoon Studios, so, you know, rip them. Now, in terms of 2020, 120 games are apparently headed to Stadia, and Google are currently, quote, targeting more than 10 games in the first half of this year alone that will be available on Stadia only when they launch. Now, this wording is pretty darn telling. Google have said that it could be several years before we actually see first-party Stadia titles, so yeah, they really jumped the gun on that one. Now, the use of the word targeting, that does evoke the imagery of Epic throwing money at games with exclusivity deals. Really not that great. Also, I mean, we're already a month into 2020. If they've got 10 launch exclusives in the next 5 months, I mean, there's not even that many games coming out in half one of this year anymore, so what could they be? Now, in the next 3 months, they're also going to add 4K gaming on the web, which basically means desktop, as well as additional support for Android phones. They also plan to improve on the existing Google Assistant functionality and introduce wireless gameplay on desktop using the Stadia controller. Again, things that should have been there from launch. Also announced last week was Stadia's new partnership with British Telecom. The UK-based ISP is going to be Stadia's first European distribution partner, and their deal will involve BT promoting Stadia with their fibre broadband bundles. So customers who actually take out specific packages beginning at $39.99 a month, more on that in a bit, with average speeds around 67 down, which is really not that fast if you compare it to Virgin, they'll get a free Stadia Premier Edition. Now, this offer is valid from purchases before January 30th, and it will be replaced with new offers afterwards. So that's the Stadia update. Really, for Stadia, this year is their first test as an overall package. In this year, they're going to see a lot of competition, especially from Games Pass being blended in with Project xCloud from Microsoft. And then also just, they had a really bad start. We had the story of, you know, their actual downloads decreasing massively on the various app stores as we rolled into this year. There was, of course, the video we did about, you know, the Destiny 2 player numbers really indicating that Stadia was just kind of falling by the wayside. So it really is obvious to me that they just quite simply launched far too early and just had a really bad, value proposition for people. And when we look at that BT deal, I mean, wow, free Stadia with my BT internet. First of all, BT internet's really not that great, and also $39.99 a month. Well, here's the deal. That's a lot of money. If you're also getting, you know, some Stadia Pro on top of that, that's actually really, really expensive. And you look at the Xbox One X, or not X, sorry, the Xbox One All Digital Edition, there are bundles that are like $150, $180, right? It's pretty darn cheap. Now, here's the thing, right? If you have decent internet that does not have a lot of downstream, but, you know, has decent ping, you can get an incredible multiplayer experience on maybe only 15, 20 down. But for Stadia, you need a lot down. The reason is, you know, you're actually streaming the game, you know, to you. But say if you've got family members using Netflix or something like that at the same time, you actually need a lot of headroom with Stadia, which does make it a lot more expensive and really not that good of a deal for budget-conscious gamers whatsoever. So that part of their business model is clearly failing. Now, we've already talked about how core gamers clearly are not the target here. I mean, even just the experience of playing on Stadia, the latency, it sucks. It really does. But what's even worse there is, you know, going for those timed exclusives. I mean, if they do end up going the Epic route, you know, an exclusive being first party, I'm fine with that. You footed the bill for developing the game. Sure, make it exclusive for your platform. Fair enough. But for Stadia, you know, going that Epic Games route, trying to pick up those exclusives, I mean, that's just going to be another pretty major loss. And it's actually even worse because if you're playing a new game on the Epic Games Store, you'll have some store issues. Maybe that happened in the past. I mean, it did in a few cases. But once you actually boot up the game, you still have that game on your PC running excellently. But if a game is having a timed launch on Stadia, that means that for a period of time, the only version of that game that is available would be the Stadia version. And the Stadia version is going to be worse than a local version. It just will be. So, I mean, again, this is Google quite simply, I think, not understanding the market and being highly embarrassing. Next up, though, some potential good news, a company actually listening. We've known for a while now that Ubisoft games can be a bit bland and a bit samey, but it looks like Ubisoft now actually know that as well. Over the weekend, VGC reported that Ubisoft is soon going to announce plans for a dramatic shakeup of its core creative team, basically as a way to bounce back from a rather challenging year. I mean, really was. So this Paris-based editorial team has overseen the company's creative direction for 2 decades worth of games, and they're responsible for that big push towards the open world titles, as an example. Maybe they just really have a hard-on for radio towers. Now, historically, that team's influence has resulted in a cohesive and unified creative vision across Ubisoft's releases, which in some times has been good, in other times it just has made them all feel the same. Now, after the piss-poor state of Ghost Recon Breakpoint at launch and supposedly some underperformance of The Division 2, it seemingly has become clear to Ubisoft that this cohesion between their games has just become stagnation. The company has announced that it is going to be actually implementing pretty significant changes across the board in that sort of unified editorial team, and this team is going to be expanded and reorganized, and their goal here is to allow that team to become, quote, more agile, and thus to create more individual and creative gaming experiences, which, you know what, sounds like a good thing. And a notable addition to that team is the former creative director of the Splinter Cell series, who reportedly is going to be rejoining Ubisoft after less than a year with Epic Games. Overall, what is my thought here? Well, Ubisoft are rattled. You know, it was a wake-up call. Seeing Ghost Recon, the Wildlands doing decently and doing that military fantasy, but then, seeing it kind of be cross-dissolved with some of the aesthetics from The Division and just having, all the typical homogenization, the RPGification of the game, that really just shooting Ghost Recon Breakpoint in the back of the head, and of course, in the process, really wasting a lot of the excellent work that game's developers did, which is a very sad thing. They've seen that, and even when it happened, they actually announced a pretty notable shift back of loads of games, so many delays, so many delays that their stock price took an absolute tumble, and at the time I said that, well, you know what, that's actually, first of all, it's the rational thing to do, but sometimes when we're always obsessed with quarterly earnings, the rational thing to do can actually be brave from a financial, perspective. So Ubisoft actually listening, actually taking their, changing their plans in line with user feedback, I've got to say, that's a good thing. In terms of commitment here, apparently one Ubisoft Montreal developed game was actually quite far into development and it's believed to have been scrapped. So it's one of those things where, I'm always ready to blast AAA when they do things badly, but, as much as we do that, also when they do good things and they make rational decisions, we've got to be fair. And in this case, I've got to be fair to Ubisoft. It seems like they're responding to feedback and making good moves. So, more power to them for, taking the short-term hit for long-term gain, which should be the same thing to do. And with that, let's move on to the next story. So this one's fairly interesting and a bit of a departure. The new PS5 controller might be compatible with the PS4. Now, this is according to a listing on the French Sony site that was detailing different PS4 models. Now, the UK version of this site listed the DualShock 4 as the only compatible controller with the PS5, while the French site initially listed both DualShock 4 and 5 before quickly fixing it. Now, this new controller is yet to be officially unveiled by the company or even officially named, though, Sony naming conventions, they would suggest that it would be called the DualShock 5. I think that's a safe bet. This compatibility would certainly be welcome, and it would also mirror Microsoft's apparent desire to just create a unified gaming ecosystem across their different bits of hardware, that's just unfettered by typical generational boundaries. Now, that being said, we've not heard of cross-generation exclusives from Sony like we have had for Microsoft, so it's hard to know if they're fully committing to that direction. And I'd also like to add, sometimes you sell a console at a loss to get people in, but you'd sell accessories like controllers, at a profit. So in this case, the PS4 won that console war in terms of, units shipped. And this is just off the top of my head, let's just say there's 70 million consoles out there. Well, that's 70 million people with a console that they're probably playing. And, if you offer those people a controller upgrade, maybe they're going to purchase it. And if that controller is going to be at a significant profit to you, then it makes sense to have cross-compatibility with that controller. Microsoft, look how much they've invested in controllers. You've got the Xbox Design Lab, you've got your Elite controller Series 1 and 2, you know, maybe they've actually seen that big market of, you know, just aftermarket custom controllers, or, you know, just different SKUs of controllers made by different companies, and they think, hang on a second, we could make a lot of money from that. And maybe that's what they've actually done, which, I mean, hey, more choice for a consumer seems like a rational, you know, move for them to make. Yeah, thumbs up. And past that, and potentially in crunch news, Take-Two Interactive are reportedly pressuring ROCKSTAR to return to their more frequent release schedule. One that, you know, if you look at this release graph of ROCKSTAR games, yeah, they've slowed down. I mean, hey, look at the shark cards. Now, this claim comes from a Rockstar Games YouTuber called SweGTA, I think that's how you say his name, who suggests that while such a move would be detrimental to their bigger games, it could incentivize the creation of, you know, just smaller projects like, say, Bully or Manhunt. So, an interesting rumor going around, like Rockstar's release schedule, it certainly has thinned out over the years. You know, there's a 6-year gap between the release of GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2. But GTA 5 was, you know, apparently the best-selling game of the decade, and Red Dead Redemption certainly wasn't too far behind it. Then again, Rockstar's games, they certainly do make a lot of money, so it's hardly surprising that Take-Two Interactive, yeah, would like to crack that whip and get more of them. And really, it could just be a typical quality versus quantity debate, though you could perhaps argue that Rockstar, you know, have the resources to actually pull off both of those things. And I'd also say that, you know, it's interesting that this just suggests that GTA and Red Dead Redemption, you know, that they're not enough, because those are microtransaction games that make a lot of money. So you got to wonder, do Take-Two want a more balanced portfolio, or do they see this as opportunities to make more games that are also opportunities for recurring user spend, as we always love? And then finally, 2 funny delays, because it's just delays everywhere. Iron Man VR delayed from February 28th to May 15th, and Dying Light 2 delayed from spring 2020 to whenever Techland feel like it. And you know what? If they have, you know, announced that delay, but have also not announced a new date, my personal hope there is that that means that, you know, it's just going to be done when it's done, and the employees are not going to be crunched that much, and, you know, things are going to be reasonable, instead of, yep, we're delaying by 2 months, and we've also just, I don't know, do you polish the whip that you're about to crack on your employees before you use it? I don't know, but you get my point. Hopefully it's all good over there. So, many delays, many interesting stories. Let me know what you think about them down below. And if you want another video to watch, Joe Biden and the NHS. Yup, they turned into they appeared in my gaming video, because turns out you try to cover gaming news and bloody hell, you just end up covering half the world. Very fun. So, you can check that out. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.